He's still the #1 recording artist seller for RCA Records in death. I mean, come on, there's something there.
While the other career contributed to his demise.
He was tired of doing the same thing over and over. So he turned to something, and of course Elvis helped me with prescription drugs.
Where does he come from? Who is he?
Well, I'm the Sheik of Araby.
He sang, danced, fought his way into our hearts. He became what producer Hal Wallace called the only sure thing in Hollywood, and commanded $1 million a picture.
At one time in the early 60s there, Elvis Presley was the highest paying individual taxpayer in the United States.
When in Los Angeles, Presley lived in a series of enormous pleasure palaces.
It was like a mobile Playboy mansion, I guess would be the term.
He played around off the set.
With some of the girls, it was wild, wicked sex.
And on location.
We might be throwing whipped cream on each other or squirting somebody with water, you know, and stuff like that.
Though the world was at his feet, his film career tumbled into buffoonery as picture after picture had him dressing up and dumbing down.
And the guy who had done numbers like Jailhouse Rock, the King Creole, is suddenly singing Rock-a-Hula Baby.
A frustrated Elvis turned to prescription drugs to quell his growing anxiety. His friends could not make him stop. Best, it was Hollywood that killed Elvis Presley.
He gave up when he realized he didn't have a dream left.
Elvis in Hollywood will take you into the wild world of Elvis Presley, movie star. The story will be told through interviews with co-stars, directors, producers, and members of Elvis's elite entourage, the Memphis Mafia. Lamar Fike, Marty Lacker, Joe Esposito, Sonny West, and Elvis's cousin, Billy Smith, are all the King's men. They lived and worked with Elvis for nearly 18 years and knew him better than anybody.
We were more dedicated to him than we were our family.
You'll get a rare glimpse behind the curtains of Elvis's carefully concealed life in Hollywood through rare home movies, reenactments, film clips, and never-before-seen photographs of Elvis on set. Discover the wild times and lonely desires of the King as the True Hollywood Story brings you Elvis in Hollywood. On the dreary morning of January 8, 1935, Dr. William Robert Hunt went out to Old Saltier Road in Tupelo, Mississippi to deliver a baby. The baby boy was stillborn. According to author Bill Burke, the doctor turned to leave.
Gladys Presley, Elvis's mother, said, "I think there's another one up in there." And he said, "No, I don't think so." And she said, "I really do. I think there's somebody up in there." And so they went back and found Elvis.
Haunted by the death of his twin brother, Elvis yearned for a better life beyond his dirt-poor beginnings. Friend, Kitty Jones.
He was searching always. He felt, I think, because he was a twin, that he should do double better than he did.
Well, Elvis was a hustler. He would cut grass, he would deliver groceries, and babysit some, whatever it took to make 15 cents, 20 cents, you know. But then he would turn around a lot of times and spend that money on other people, even then.
When he was 13 years old, Elvis, his mother Gladys, and his father Vernon moved from Tupelo to Memphis, Tennessee in 1948.
Music was very much a part of the blood of Memphis, the lifeblood of Memphis. There was music everywhere.
It was along the sidewalks of Beale Street that Elvis found his true love.
He was seen in Club Handy. He would stand in the door. He wouldn't come in the club. He would stand in the door, and he would mock their movements, you know, like the hip movements and the leg movements.
Elvis's unique style of dress made him a standout at Humes High School. Classmate Marty Lacker.
The way Elvis dressed here at that time in Memphis, the loud clothes and loud colors and pistol pockets and saddle stitch pants and peg pants. Elvis was basically the only white guy in Memphis that dressed that way because he got his clothes on Beale Street, which was predominantly black at the time.
Indirectly, Elvis began his movie career as a teenager.
Elvis was a theater usher at the old Lowe's State Theater on South Main Street. It was one of the first-run movie houses, and he did it not so much for the money, although he would take the money and needed the money, but he got to see the movies as well.
But before the movies, there was music. Legendary record producer Sam Phillips owned and operated Sun Records in Memphis. It was here Elvis cut his first acetate and eventually made history. He was 18 years old.
But Elvis came, people really don't know how modest his means were. I mean, they were almost starvation at times. You know. I felt this the minute I saw Elvis Presley. He was undoubtedly the most introverted person.
According to Elvis biographer Peter Gurelnik, Elvis was primarily a ballad singer.
Sam heard something in his voice, but when he went in for his first recording session, he was nothing but a ballad singer. He had sung nothing but ballads, and Sam waited and waited and waited. He didn't know what was coming.
We got on with it before long. Now, it took us a few sessions because he didn't play with anybody. I got Scotty Moore and Bill Black after I heard him picking on his guitar a little bit.
Guitarist Scotty Moore would become Elvis's first manager. He recalls the recording session at Sun Studios that changed the world of music forever.
So we went in the next night, and he put down all kinds of different songs, and we listened to them. And during a break, Elvis just started fraying his guitar and started singing "That's All Right, Mama," just nervous energy.
Elvis just started playing a song that nobody could ever have imagined that he knew, let alone could sing. That was, Sam Phillips came out of control and said, "That's it."
We knew it was different, but we didn't know what it was.
What it was rock and roll.
It was that kind of patience, perception, and almost unreserved approval that I think characterized the Sun sessions and makes them so extraordinary.
I just really knew that if I didn't get out of this guy something that, quote unquote, was different, then it had to be my fault.
In 1956, Elvis Presley was clearly on the rise.
Elvis's pelvic gyrations will send teenagers into ecstasy, parents into panic. And some newspapers and clergymen even warn that Elvis Presley and rock and roll are threats to the national security.
His recordings of That's All Right Mama, Hound Dog, and Treat Me Nice were chart-busting hits. He performed before sellout crowds all across the country. Fans would be so loud at times, it was impossible to hear him sing. Record company executives and Hollywood producers were beating down his door. But Elvis Presley wasn't satisfied with just records, and to rise to the top of the charts, Elvis Presley soared higher and faster than any other performer ever had. Only one world remained unconquered. Elvis went to Hollywood. As Elvis won over crowds of adoring fans with his loose hips and sexy swagger, a flamboyant circus barker, Colonel Tom Parker, plotted Elvis's transformation into a one-man money machine. Elvis's first cousin, Billy Smith.
The snowman is what he called himself, and he had a lot of these little cards made up, and he'd give them out to people, and he was the main snowman. What that, speaks for itself, how good can you con somebody else?
Once the Colonel had his claws in Elvis, Parker never let go. Elvis's friend, Lamar Fike.
Colonel made a deal with Elvis at the beginning, in 55 and 56. He said, "Listen, you take care of the singing, I'll take care of the business. And one will not interfere with the other." And for a while it worked that way until the latter stages. Colonel started getting involved in everything.
With Elvis's music career in the hands of the Colonel, the next step was to conquer Hollywood. On March 31st, 1956, a 21-year-old Elvis Presley flew to Los Angeles. Joe Esposito.
If he walked in this room right now, before he came around the corner, you would know he's here, or somebody's here. You'd all sit and watch as he walked in the door. That's the way it was every place we went. I've never been another star like that.
Elvis had to do movies. The question was, which one? On April 6, 1956, Elvis signed with producer Hal Wallace for $450,000 to star in 3 pictures.
The Colonel said, "What do you want Elvis for? He's going to bring money. It's part of this business. If he's going to bring you a lot of money, don't you think we should get a piece of it?" And Hal Wallace said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." Well, they said, Elvis was in the room just listening. He said, "Okay, let's get out of here. We're leaving." And Hal Wallace said, "Okay, you got a piece of the action." And that's the first time that any star in Hollywood ever got a piece of the film. It was after, it wasn't off the gross like today, it was off the net. Then it eventually, see, these are the deals that Colonel did that nobody else ever even tried to do.
Wallace's first move was to loan Elvis out to 20th Century Fox. Writer-director Al Cantor.
And when Fox asked for his services,
it seems to me he was more than happy to allow him to do this one role and find out whether or not the kid would come off on the screen. And of course, the kid did come off on the screen.
The Fox film was originally titled The Reno Brothers. It was the story of two brothers in love with the same woman. Elvis showed up on the set on August the 8th, 1956. Elvis biographer, Pat Broski.
The studio went all out. There were signs welcoming him. A lot of the employees were there to greet him. Just about every secretary on the lot seemed to somehow get the day off. It was a big event because Elvis Presley had come to town. And to the director's surprise, once filming began, Elvis showed up with the entire script memorized. Everyone's lines, not just his.
Elvis biographer, Peter Goralnik.
Elvis was more or less rushed into it. I think it was about a month's notice. He won the whole cast and crew over very quickly. And he gave a performance that in some ways I think is almost like an imitation of a performance. He wanted to be Marlon Brando. And you watch him and you can see how awkward he is and how he doesn't know what to do, and yet he's putting his heart out there.
Say you want your lover. Say you ain't laid awake every night by my side thinking of him. Wishing I was bent. Wishing you'd waited for him and never married me.
The film's co-star was Deborah Paget. Paget was the first of Elvis's many, many infatuations with his co-stars.
I think that was Elvis's one great love, as you would call puppy love.
Unfortunately, Deborah Paget was already involved with someone with a lot more money and power than Elvis, Howard Hughes.
I was standing in the foyer of the house, and I watched a Chevrolet sedan about 10 times come around the house. And I didn't know. I said, Elvis, I think somebody's following us. And Deborah was standing there. And she said, no, that's one of Howard Hughes' men, or Howard, checking on who I'm with.
In the movie, Elvis's character dies, but the film tested poorly with audiences, and the ending was reshot with Elvis's character singing from beyond the grave. The song, Love Me Tender, became so popular, so integral to the production, the movie was retitled Love Me Tender, opened on November 15, 1956, and became a smash hit despite weak reviews. Elvis's screen credit read, Introducing Elvis Presley. According to producer David Weisbart, that was like introducing Eisenhower. Outside the Paramount Theater in New York, Colonel Parker unveiled a 50-foot-tall cardboard picture of Elvis as gaping fans looked on. The film became the second largest grossing picture of the year, and Elvis's future as a film actor seemed secure. By 1957, with several #1 hit songs and a blockbuster movie, Elvis became one of the highest-paid superstars in America. To show his appreciation, he bought his mother, Gladys, a new home in Memphis on Audubon Drive. Author Bill Burke.
And not only did he buy a house, but he wanted her life to be so easy that he bought 2 mixers for the kitchen counter, one at each end so she wouldn't have to walk too far if she had to use a mixer.
Gladys got her dream house with all the amenities, but she was losing Elvis.
What Gladys Presley thought was that her son would become a huge regional star, that his career would allow him to come home on weekends.
A war drama. The film's title was changed to Love Me Tender to capitalize on Elvis's popularity as a singer. It was a marketing ploy that would be repeated over and over in Elvis's movie career. For Elvis Presley's second picture, producer Hal Wallace decided to play it safe. He gave Elvis a role he could handle hands down. Writer-director Hal Cantor.
The whole story is about a kid who sings and becomes famous.
In short, the movie entitled Loving You was the story of Elvis himself.
Loving You, the first big modern musical built around the fiery personality of Elvis Presley.
I figure he'd tell her yellow, don't you?
Presley, a dramatic surprise in this hard-hitting, frankly revealing story of an American kid who fought and sang his way to the top.
Director Hal Cantor spent time in Memphis observing Elvis prior to production. After a short tour of his hometown, Elvis took the director home to Audubon Way.
In this rather modest little frame house seemed to be the largest collection of gold records I had ever seen.
During a pool game, one of Elvis's friends coaxed him into performing for Cantor a speech he'd learned.
Go ahead, man. Say the piece for the man. So Elvis recited General MacArthur's farewell speech to Congress. I sat listening to that and hoping that he didn't remember all of it, but he did remember all of it, and he insisted on doing the whole thing.
The 22-year-old Elvis had by now made a study of film acting, and he was all too willing to share his thoughts with Cantor.
And he said, is there any place that I'm going to have to smile? And I said, well, I don't recall any place I've written he smiles. I said, why do you ask that question? He said, well, I noticed, he says, that the men I like on screen, Jimmy Dean, Marlon Brando, he said, they never smile. He said, when they do finally smile, he said, it's like an event. He said, so I'm going to save my smile as much as I can, if it's okay with you. I said, it's okay with me.
It's not my future you care about, it's yours. It's what I can do for you. You don't care about me or Tex or anybody, just yourself.
You've got 15 minutes to get on that stage and find out if you've even got a future.
Presley brought to Hollywood a high school friend and a first cousin. He simply did not like to be alone, and he was comfortable with his Memphis buddies. Author Pat Broski.
Elvis was incredibly lonely and had a hard time relating to the people he met out in Hollywood. And they were kind of a buffer for him.
Elvis caught on to the Hollywood way. The role of Deke Rivers, Elvis dyed his naturally sandy blonde hair to jet black. Friend Kitty Jones.
He was a blonde, and he dyed his hair, and that made him much more erotic looking. As a matter of fact, we talked about that a lot. He wanted to look like Tony Curtis. He thought Tony Curtis had this sexy sex appeal, and he said, if I get my hair black, then I'm going to look like that kind of look. He had those piercing eyes, and Elvis had those piercing blue eyes.
Unlike his first movie, Elvis's original band was cast in Loving You. According to guitarist Scotty Moore, the music didn't stop when the camera did.
I always take my amplifier and put it on the set. He'd go get one of the electricians to get power, so in between changing lights or something, we'd just start playing on stage. The directors would get a little hostile about that, but we never stopped.
The impromptu jam sessions drew hundreds of visitors from all over the Paramount lot.
I finally had to say, no more visitors, please, because we're losing time, and time is money. And the money is Dal Wallace's, and he doesn't like to lose it.
After the release of Loving You, Elvis Presley's fame reached new heights. But not everyone was enamored with Presley's on-screen image. For his part, Cantor received threats from religious zealots who saw Elvis as an instrument of the devil.
Crank calls from people who were threatening me about putting this man on film. They were threatening to burn my house down, poison my dog, kill my children. Really frightening sort of thing.
What kind of a town is this? You can't do this to us!
Elvis and pals Lamar Fike and Gene Smith moved into the Knickerbocker Hotel just off Hollywood Boulevard. They occupied the entire top floor, with throngs of female fans constantly trying to catch sight of Elvis. Their living quarters became something like a well-appointed jail. It was a luxurious but boring existence, especially for a bunch of men in their early 20s. Elvis killed time by staging harmless pranks, like spelling his name on a coffee table with lighter fluid, then lighting it. He dated several pretty young actresses, including star Natalie Wood. Lamar Fike.
We used to call her the Mad Nat. It was so funny. She was a very, very funny person. Natalie sometimes would just get very dramatic.
While thousands of female fans were searching for a way up to Elvis's hotel suite, Natalie searched for a way down.
She got a little uptight, act like she was gonna jump out the window, and she didn't. I said, well, okay. I think she got mad because nobody cared.
From the Hollywood elite to his stable of extras, Elvis's ongoing rapport with women was only just beginning.
Somebody asked me if he was going to get married, and he said something to the effect of, no. He said, why buy a cow when he can steal the milk through the fence?
Elvis and his crew eventually left the Knickerbocker and the screaming fans behind.
They finally just ran him out of there because we just destroyed the hotel.
Elvis moved on to a new hotel, Beverly, Wilshire. and a new studio as well. With Loving You at number 7 on Variety's list of top-grossing films, producer Hal Wallace loaned Elvis out again, this time to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. MGM was the center of the Hollywood galaxy, the home of Judy Garland, Lana Turner, Jimmy Stewart, and dozens of other stars. George Klein.
We were very impressed by that. I'll never forget the first day on the lot. They assigned him Clark Gable's dressing room. Went over and he said, wow, Clark Gable's dressing room, man. Couldn't believe it.
You know, you go to the commissary at MGM where every big star that ever was under contract at MGM. And they'd be over there eating.
But according to assistant director Bob Rellier, Elvis was not the only one excited by the move to MGM.
I got a call in my office, and it was from the cops at the so-called Thalberg Gate, right at that main administration building, who were saying, you know, we've got to have some help down here. We can't handle, he's trying to come in with his entourage, and they're rushing the cars, and these secretaries are out of control.
Production finally got underway on Elvis's first MGM film, Jailhouse Rock. Elvis portrayed Vince Everett, who, in his own words, don't treat nobody nice.
How dare you think such cheap tactics would work with me?
I need tactics, honey. It's just a beast in me.
Co-workers remember Elvis as maybe the nicest guy on the lot.
When he hit the makeup department in the morning, he got coffee for the hairdressers, and then the actresses, and then the rest of the cast, and then he got his. And he was the kind of person that you knew he wasn't doing it for effect. He was doing it because he thought, you know, mom and apple pie and everything else, that's the way you do it, regardless of what you're getting paid.
And then came Hollywood.
No, Vince, let's try it again. Vince! How do you like our movie star, Peggy?
He has adapted very quickly.
Well, there's not much oxygen up where he is, and the man gets lightheaded. There comes a time when you gotta take a hand in saying that time is now. I'm gonna beat hell out of you. Don't try it. You're talking crazy. You know you got it coming, son. I said don't try.
The music was composed by legendary songwriters Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. They remember a tireless Elvis.
Elvis worked very hard. He was ready to go, you know, nonstop if he didn't like one particular take. Until he got it, he'd go 20 takes, 30 takes. Amazing energy. But it was like being in your living room. Between takes, he would sing a gospel song, the Jordanaires would join in. Then they'd order in lunch, you know, peanut butter sandwiches and orange pop.
When it came time to choreograph the now famous dance sequence, Elvis first learned the meaning of creative differences.
Alex Romero really was one heck of a choreographer. Alex had certain ways he wanted to do things.
He says, Elvis, I've got these ideas for this dance sequence. And he gets up and he starts doing all of these Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly type moves. And Elvis said, I don't know if I can do that.
Elvis said, look, he said, you know, he said, can you watch me for a while and let me sort of kind of give you the idea that I wanted.
And Elvis just sort of sang along with the records and did his movements. So Alex said, I got it, okay. And Elvis said, is that it? And he said, yeah, Elvis, stick with me on this. Elvis said, okay. So we come back the next day, and he had taken Elvis's moves and put them into the dance sequence that he originally had planned, but it was all Elvis's natural movements.
During a particularly jarring gyration, Elvis made a horrible discovery.
He had swallowed a cap off his tooth. He just started Jailhouse Rock.
But a series of x-rays failed to reveal anything. Assistant director Bob Rellier.
So we went back to the set, telling this nice young man, it's in your imagination, you didn't swallow the thing. I believe I said it's probably on the bottom of some grip's shoe right now. Let's forget it. Come back on the stage, we start again, no Elvis.
Elvis was in the bathroom making himself throw up. Rellier rushed to his side.
I said, how are you? And two things happened. One, I could tell when he talked there was a whistling sound, which you knew was not good. And he also said, you know the scratch? It's not in my throat anymore. It's down in the middle of my chest.
Elvis was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, where the cap was removed from his left lung. Colonel Parker was horrified. He feared the loss of his golden goose.
irony, of course, was that the picture was about a guy who was a singer and had a throat accident in a fight and lost his voice, and then would it come back or not?
In 1957, Elvis moved into his new Memphis mansion, Graceland. He shared the home with several relatives, including his father and an aunt who would cook his favorite, fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches. End of the draft notice. Just as he was preparing to become the next James Dean, the 23-year-old king of rock and roll was drafted into the Army in 1958. Memphis disc jockey George Klein.
It was a real downer because there was no war going on at the time, and he was at the top. He was at the peak of his career. He was the #1 star in the world at the time. He had just done 3 motion pictures, and he had another one, King Creole, coming up. He was really depressed and down about it.
Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was more than depressed. He was frantic. What if the public forgot all about Elvis while he was in the Army? Biographer Pat Broski.
There were studio memos that went back and forth over at Paramount, where he was under contract to Hal Wallace. And one executive predicted in a memo, look, while the guy's gone, the whole rock and roll phase is going to be over anyway. He said, I don't care if he ever gets back from Germany.
Then, Colonel Parker had a brainstorm. He stuck Elvis in a Nashville recording studio. Friend, Marty Lacker.
The purpose of that recording session in Nashville was to record enough songs so that while Elvis was gone, those songs would be periodically released as if he hadn't been anywhere.
Likewise, the Colonel made sure that Presley's 4th film, King Creole, was safely in the can before he left for Germany. The film tells the story of a high school dropout at odds with his father and 2 women in his life. According to friend Sonny West, King Creole was intended for somebody else.
Paramount bought it for James Dean, and then he got killed, and they shelved it, and Elvis came along and ended up making that in '57.
He loved King Creole, and that was really serious, a serious movie. There was no playing around, no nothing.
That was his favorite movie.
As soon as the picture wrapped, Private Elvis was whisked off to Germany. Selective Services asked Presley if he would be willing to perform at other Army bases. Elvis didn't mind, but the Colonel did.
Parker's answer to that was, we're not giving nothing away. Why should I have him perform and get paid $78 a month?
Elvis did an honorable job of playing soldier. Longtime friend, Lamar Fight.
He went from being what he was to a private in the Army, and he wanted to play it straight. So as a consequence, it showed at both sides of the coin. The risk he took was enormous, and it scared the hell out of him.
Elvis was in the Army for nearly 2 years from 1958 to 1960. During that time, 3 momentous events took place. On August 14, 1958, Presley's beloved mother, Gladys, died of a heart attack. She was 47 years old.
When he was in the service, he said when he found out that his mom died, he felt the spotlight was so on him to really show himself to be a master at whatever he did. He had to polish his shoes better and do all that stuff. And he had to wait until nighttime, and he would put the pillows over his head and cry about the loss of his mom, because I think he felt very deeply about her.
Gladys's death profoundly affected Elvis, leaving him insecure and rudderless. He was emotionally adrift when he met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu, his future bride. But perhaps the most important event for Elvis in the Army was his discovery of prescription drugs. Army buddy Joe Esposito.
It all started from an innocent little thing of taking these little white pills, like bennies, to keep awake, so you don't fall asleep on maneuvers and stuff. And Elvis liked it. Said this was great. You know, I fell asleep, I'd take a pill, and it was great. And that's what happened. And when he got out of the service, he took a bunch of, somebody gave him a bunch of them to take with him.
Elvis took sleeping pills to combat his insomnia. The pills would be with him until he died. When the 25-year-old Elvis returned to Hollywood, he plunged right back into films, making G.I. Blues, a predictable, not-so-funny comedy. Elvis hated it.
When he went back into the picture, he was the clock was wound a lot tighter than it was before.
Yes, America's most talked about, written about ex-GI is here to show the world there's been some changes made by that rugged tour of duty with a battling tanker. See him swing out with his buddies to take West Germany by storm.
He said, a minute, man. He said, I just got out of wearing a uniform for 2 years, and here I go. They got me putting on an Army uniform to singing to a baby, and someone drops a hat and I sing to him. That was very, very disappointing to me, and they didn't get any better.
It's Elvis on a love campaign no guy or gal should miss.
Liebe. For those who do not understand, Liebe translated means no.
Oh, you don't have to explain that to a GI. That's one of the first words he learns when he gets over here.
Oh, you too, Tosa.
But Elvis chose not to confront the colonel. He picked the scripts, the directors, and incredibly, the music.
To the colonel, it was loyalty to a fault. And the fault was that he relied so much on the colonel. And Elvis was a very non-confrontational human being. If Elvis saw a red light, he'd go turn the street before it.
What he didn't understand is that Parker was taking care of Parker.
According to journalist Bill Burke, when Elvis returned from the Army, he knew full well what was at stake.
The first question out of my mouth was to Parker saying, I bet you're glad to see your boy back so you can start making that 15% again. And Elvis said, 15%, hell, he's getting 50. And that was just so incredible, I couldn't believe it. And I said, now tell me you're lying. And Elvis looked at Parker and said, isn't that true, Colonel? And the Colonel said, yep, it's been that way.
Along with the ever-growing group of people living at Grayson, Elvis had his inner circle of male buddies. In 1961, this group included Marty Lacker, Sonny West, Sonny's cousin Red West, whom Elvis knew from Humes High School, Lamar Fike, and Elvis's cousin Billy Smith. They created the video biography, All the King's Men. Along with Joe Esposito, the group became known as the Memphis Mafia.
Back in the 60s, Elvis was wearing black mohair suits, white shirts, white tie, or black shirt and a black tie. We looked like a bunch of hoodlums.
A lot of times we'd all wear the same thing that day. And one day we're in Vegas.
We went there on weekends between making movies or whatever. Same thing, we wore the black mohair suits, Elvis included.
We pull up in front of the Riviera Hotel in 2 black limousines.
White as sheets. The cars were black, we were white.
We all get out of the car. It's like everybody gets out and the Don gets out of the limousine behind us.
And there happened to be a crowd in the front, and of course they saw it was Elvis, they went nuts.
We were going in and somebody from the press or something said, look, there goes the Mafia.
And someone said, no, that's Memphis. They're from Memphis, Elvis. And he said, well, the Memphis Mafia.
Elvis Presley's seen coming into the Riviera Hotel with his Memphis Mafia. Elvis loved that.
The group of guys adopted one female member, hairdresser Patty Perry.
And they all became like my brothers, and I became like their little sister.
Once a little sister, always a little sister.
I was different. I was a baby. I was 17, you know, and I was very inexperienced. And they knew it, so they kind of like watched over me. As I said, when I was like in my 30s, guys would hit on me, and Elvis would say, she's part of the family, she doesn't fool around. I said, I fool around.
Between movies, Elvis and his gang returned to Memphis for hometown fun. He would treat his friends to all-night excursions to roller rinks and amusement parks.
Elvis would rent what they called the Memphis Fairgrounds at that time. And he would go out there after hours.
He'd go on the roller coaster and ride it 25, 30 times in a row. Never stopped. One time he played a joke on the operator of the park. They went up and got to the top where it slows up a little. Him and Billy got out. The cars come back down, and Elvis ain't there. And the guy looked, and the guy got scared. He said, I'm going to run the cars back up again. He ran the cars back up again. When it stopped at the hill, Elvis and Billy got back in.
He told Elvis, he said, man, please don't do that again. He said, you about gave me a heart attack.
In the days before VCRs, the group would rent movie theaters for all-night screenings.
This was a place where Elvis came after it shut down, you know, normal movie hours, and he would rent it and have certain movies brought out to watch.
We'd see sometimes 2, 3, 4 movies a night. And sometimes he'd show the same one over. We saw Dr. Strangelove. If we saw it once, we saw it 50 times.
By 1962, Elvis was bringing members of the Memphis Mafia to Hollywood and putting them up in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel.
We had a lot of fights up there, water fights. One time, Red and Sonny West and myself decided to tackle Elvis and just beat him up on the floor. Just fool around, a bunch of young guys fooling around. And Elvis got real mad.
Restless and footloose, the 25-year-old Elvis returned to Hollywood ready to party, party, party. After being tossed out of several luxurious hotels in Los Angeles, Elvis and the Memphis Mafia moved into the first of several mansions. Longtime friend Lamar Fife.
They were all pretty big homes. We all lived there. It was kind of like, it was like a mobile Playboy mansion, I guess would be the term.
Living in a Bel Air mansion was just one of the many perks of life with Elvis. Presley was rolling in money, and he loved to spend it.
I know one day he bought 22 cars, Cadillacs and Pontiac and stuff like that.
Longtime friend Marty Lacker.
He understood what it would be for a young guy to have a big, shiny car, especially if it was a big, expensive one.
According to Mafia member Sonny West, Elvis's giving did not stop with his friends.
He shared with his friends and he shared with strangers. He was a giver. Wasn't selfish at all.
Female Mafia member Hattie Perry.
The best thing that Elvis liked to see is the look on your face when he'd give you a gift. He'd put his hands behind his back and he'd say, pick a hand. You say the right hand. He'd give me a diamond ring. He bought me beautiful jewelry. He bought me Jewish stars. He always wore a Jewish star and a cross because he always said he didn't want to get shut out of heaven on a technicality.
When you had that much money, that much fame, you can pretty well write your own rules.
He couldn't tell you what a loaf of bread cost, what a house payment was, what a rental on an apartment would be, because from the time he was thrown into his career, it was so quick, other people did those things.
Elvis and his Mafia rarely ventured beyond the mansion walls.
We weren't in prison, but we usually didn't go out. Elvis basically didn't like the lifestyle of the people out there in California.
Elvis's cousin, Billy Smith, concurs.
I think he felt more comfortable with the guys he had around him and his fans.
Memphis disc jockey George Klein.
Elvis did not fit into the Hollywood crowd. He went to very few Hollywood parties because he wanted to do his own thing. So that's why he had his circle of friends with him. And we would do our own partying at his house up in Bel Air.
The cloistered environment allowed Elvis to indulge his fantasies.
I mean, here's a guy that grew up in a make-believe world who was able to live in a make-believe world and make that make-believe world become real, even though it wasn't. But he could do that.
Elvis worked, played, and even slept with his companions.
You know, Elvis didn't like to sleep alone. So, I mean, when he didn't have a day, I would sleep with him. But there was no sex, you know. Unfortunately.
He maintained rather interesting table manners as well.
He had a thing about sharing his food. When you eat, he'd take something off of your plate, but you couldn't touch his plate. So he had a real weird thing about his food. Don't touch his food.
Elvis cut your arm off at the elbow if you tried it.
The Presley lifestyle was simple.
We would sit up all night and watch TV, or sometimes he'd keep the TV on, cut the sound off, and we'd listen to music or talk.
And he liked, as I say, the Dick Van Dyke Show. And he loved the Little Rascals. And he loved football.
But if Elvis didn't like who he was watching, he made a point of expressing himself.
And he was watching the television one night, and Robert Goulet come in, and I think he was singing "If I Were, I Would Leave You." And Elvis took his gun and shot, blew the television away.
Apparently, Elvis didn't like Robert Goulet. But then, gunfire at the Bel Air estate was a common occurrence.
And we were sitting Perugia Way one night, and he decided to have shooting practice, and he shot all the glasses in the bar.
Dangerous shootouts involving explosives and fireworks were a common sight.
He shot a rocket at us, man, one of the bottle rockets. All you hear is, and it's there. And it hit the side of the house, and we didn't know, and we said, no more of that, man, because that was dangerous.
As fireworks flew, so did fists and feet as Elvis engaged in martial arts battles with stunt double Lance Legault.
I did some martial arts with him in the center of this field one day while we were on a break, and he threw me upside down on my head so quick I didn't know what happened.
He loved karate. And he'd come home and he'd break boards. So he'd entertain us breaking board. He says, come on, Pat, break a board. My hairdresser got my hands. You know? He said, you can do it. He said, you know, put your whole body into it. He showed you how to hold your hand and this and that. And I broke a board. I couldn't believe it. And he was so thrilled that I broke this board.
Neither fireworks nor karate chops could compete with the antics of Elvis's pet monkey, Scatter.
Scatter was a chimpanzee that Elvis got as a pet. Scatter was the funniest little chimpanzee. They used to dress him in the same kind of jumpsuits that they would all the Memphis Mafia guys would wear.
We had a lot of fun with him. A lot of fun with him. He had a great personality.
Scatter liked to drink. And when we'd have parties, And he'd go around and drink all the drinks that were left over, and he'd like to go and look under the girls' skirts. And he'd run with his hands up in the air going, and freak you out.
He'd run off into the bathroom to get away from him, and they'd shut that door, and he'd beat them in there. He was right behind them and started making that noise again. They held that door and run out.
Scatter's antics didn't amuse everyone, especially Patty Perry.
I gave Scatter a right hook, and he flew across that room. And Elvis, I thought, was going to die. He laughed so hard, but Scatter never came near me again.
Scatter even got to visit Elvis on the set.
We got banned from the Golden Lot. He jumped out of the car and ran up a drain pipe and jumped in the middle of Sam Goldwyn's desk.
Hey, what the hell's going on?
Sam Goldwyn was hurt.
We got a call from the front office to come get our monkey.
Elvis reluctantly sent Scatter back to Memphis to live behind Graceland.
Elvis sent him back to Memphis, had a beautiful place built for him with air conditioning for summer and heat control for winter, and beautiful inside facility in the yard, I mean, where he could come out and play with bars and stuff.
The maid went out one time to feed him, and you never knew. He was very unpredictable. She went out to feed him, and he just reached and grabbed her by the hair. Well, her hair came off because she had on a wig, and boy, she went to scream.
Scatter didn't much care for the peace and quiet of Memphis. A few months after taking up residence, he died.
He died of a broken heart, I think. One day they went out there and he was dead, and he wasn't that old.
When he was in the service, he said when he found out that his mom died, he felt the spotlight was so on him to really show himself to be a master at whatever he did. He had to polish his shoes better and do all that stuff. And he had to wait until nighttime, and he would put the pillows over his head and cry about the loss of his mom, because I think he felt very deeply about her.
Gladys's death profoundly affected Elvis, leaving him insecure and rudderless. He was emotionally adrift when he met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu, his future bride. But perhaps the most important event for Elvis in the Army was his discovery of prescription drugs. Army buddy Joe Esposito.
It all started from an innocent little thing of taking these little white pills, like bennies, to keep awake, so you don't fall asleep on maneuvers and stuff. And Elvis liked it. Said this was great. You know, I fell asleep, I'd take a pill, and it was great. And that's what happened. And when he got out of the service, he took somebody gave him a bunch of them to take with him.
Elvis took sleeping pills to combat his insomnia. The pills would be with him until he died. When the 25-year-old Elvis returned to Hollywood, he plunged right back into films, making G.I. Blues, a predictable, not-so-funny comedy. Elvis hated it.
When he went back into the picture, the clock was wound a lot tighter than it was before.
Yes, America's most talked about, written about ex-GI is he.